Is the Purge a political device?
It is a psychological one. If we want to save our country, we must release all our anger in one night.
Tonight, we'll see the good and evil in everything.
Coming in at number 5, Festival of Saturnalia. This festival was an eagerly awaited, week-long holiday that was celebrated by ancient Romans. During the pagan festivities, which took place between December 17th to the 25th, people were encouraged to get drunk and do whatever they wanted. This included sacrificing each other to the gods. Throughout this week, businesses and work would be suspended, and slaves were given the freedom to do and say what they like. This Roman festival was extremely lawless, and citizens would even sacrifice themselves in the name of the god of Saturn. The first year the festival was held, it was supposed to be pretty innocent. It was expected to be a happy time where people would just have fun. But as it went on throughout the years, it took a darker edge when people took advantage of the freedom by turning to violence. In images depicting the festival, you can see all of the drinking and the fighting that took place. But the festival turned really dark when it was decided that a few fake kings would be crowned and given the power to order people to do anything they wanted. But at the end of the festival, these rulers were sacrificed at the temple of Saturn as a show of respect for the Roman god. With punishment suspended, human sacrifices, carnage in the streets, and pure freedom, people have connected this event to the Purge. They do seem really similar, I have to admit. And at number 4, copycats. A teenager in Louisville, Kentucky decided it would be a good idea to put up a poster threatening the lives of the people in the community, claiming that the real-life Purge event was going to take place. So clearly, we know that this was just a teen pulling a prank, but oh man, the backlash on this was insane. The sign obviously went viral on social media, which made the citizens fear riots. After the sign went up, other people across America began making similar threats. Authorities had to be alerted to make sure these threats were not being carried out. At number 3, Florida. There was also another copycat threat made in Florida. Back in 2014, all over social media, there were announcements being made that a real-life purge would be taking place. There was a date and time and numbers for safe houses. Once those numbers for safe houses went up, people really started to freak out. Before the assumed start time, the county sheriff, David Morgan, stated that the department was aware of this threat and was investigating it. He also cautioned all of the residents and the media to exercise a mature and measured response in how they reacted to the threats. Despite the number of copycats that have claimed this night is going to happen for real, the authorities aren't too concerned about it. Coming in at number 2, Ireland. So back in 2016, the Irish police force threatened to go on strike during all of the Fridays in November unless they got a significant pay increase. And this caused people to worry that a real-life purge might take place. I mean, having no law enforcement for all of the Fridays, that's pretty scary. On the average day, it's not like you call the police, but having people know that there's no one protecting the citizens on one certain night, that's a scary thought. When this strike was being discussed, there were so many things that had people freaking out. One major thing was airports and banks shutting down for the day. There was even a theory that the Irish army would stand in for the police if needed, but that theory was shot down quickly. Media sources went to the streets to see what people said they would do if the police did in fact go on strike. Most of the people they interviewed said that they would just stay home. But then of course you have those people who are looking for a reaction. So someone said they would vandalize the town, while another said they would rob a store. But like I said, for the most part, many people didn't say they were going to cause trouble. And a lot of people interviewed said that they believe that the police do deserve a raise and they simply were not getting paid enough money. And in at number 1, Brazil. Now Brazil is a pretty different story than Ireland. Back in 2017 in Brazil, the police in the state of Espírito Santo took a 6-day strike over wages and poor work conditions. Basically, people took this strike as a sign that they could do whatever they wanted. Just after a few days of the strike, there were a reported 52 murders, thousands of cases of rape, theft, shops being robbed, vehicles being torched, and people fighting with machetes and guns on the streets. To survive the British Purge, many people stayed inside their homes. They would board up their windows, turn off the lights, and they would sit in their house armed with whatever they could use as a weapon, all while listening to the screaming and chaos that was going on outside. Due to the complete lawlessness, schools, parks, and health services were closed. That means no injuries could be taken care of. Also at this time, there was a yellow fever outbreak, which a lot of the residents were battling with. But due to the health services being down, they were unable to get their vaccines. After almost a week, as a response to this inhumanity and lawlessness, the Brazilian military stormed the streets to retake control and restore order and discipline.
Tonight allows people a release for all the hatred and violence that they keep up inside them.
This won't bring him back.
Could a purge actually happen in real life? Now, I feel like I'm stepping into my boots a little bit, so we're going to be covering a scary topic in a bit of a different way. Scary in the sense of life and death. We're asking, could a purge actually happen in real life? We've all seen the films, what are we at now, 4? And the concept of an American dystopian action horror is alarmingly not that far away from fiction at this point. But when we break down the technicalities of one night a year where all crime, including murder, is legal, things get a little interesting. I mean, I think I've wrapped up the answer to this question already. It's no, but just stick with me because the interesting thing is why. So firstly, there are some pretty rich people in the world right now. There are reported 540 billionaires in the United States alone, with a combined worth of $2.399 trillion. And when you flick a switch and turn crime off for 12 hours, there's a lot of other people who are going to want a piece of that pie. Luckily for the billionaires, there'd be a ton of hired mercenaries willing to defend their property for a price. But how long would that really last? Because people on the lower end of society who can't afford guns and armoured vehicles, they're going to get pretty tired of the purge pretty fast. You can't just wipe them all out. And just like history has taught us, when enough people come together in a revolutionary army, it doesn't really matter how much money you have. And even if it failed in the first year, that army would only get stronger and stronger and learn from the lessons of the other failed attempts. On that same point, it would also be pretty much impossible to even make sure people followed the rules of Purge Night. Even if a law like the Purge actually made its way through the Senate, most common, decent people would just leave the country. Why would they wait around for just one night of the year where they'd most likely be brutally murdered? Businesses would more than likely close down and move overseas, to a country where their workforce isn't systematically eradicated every year. On the flip side to that, there's also the argument that a society who upheld the purge would be completely supportive of that idea. And even the majority of people who'd left, maybe the United States would have already answered its own question to the population issue without killing anyone. And then the remaining people could practice their purge amendment right alongside right-minded people, and everyone's a winner. We also have to remember how difficult it would even be to bring an end to a purge night. Okay, so the sun comes up, everyone put down your weapon, even though you just shot my wife. They're the rules. The mass hysteria of arming an entire population isn't just a kind of time-out gig. Those poor people would be so angry, pumped full of adrenaline, and also armed to the teeth. Neighborhoods would band together, they'd build walls around themselves and say, "No purge over here," and that's all year round. The last thing a crazy government wants to do is arm the average citizen and think that the police and social order aren't something that they can depend on for safety. Now here's the main point. Humans on a whole aren't completely psychotic. Our friends are really great, and we'd rather spend one night of the year shooting fireworks into the sky instead of automatic submachine guns. Now, don't get me wrong, the world is a pretty scary place. There's no denying that. And even in 2014, when the Purge films were first topping the box office, people were trying to jump on the hype train and root for a 12-hour lawless crime spree. Facebook pages popped up from Detroit, Chicago, Jacksonville, Miami, and even Cleveland. And guess what? No one showed up. But I can do you one better. Deep in the Bolivian Andes, there is one day each year in early May where the locals gather in their town square and practice their own kind of purge. The ancient practice, known as Tinku, encourages the local people to erupt in a festival of violent brawling. Their weapons are fists and sticks and stones, but the battles are prearranged, and most people are just looking to settle long-standing family grudges. Alongside this though, there are huge feasts and, a bit of a party, elaborate dances and some musical events. Don't get me wrong, some people have actually died during Tinku, but for the most part, once it's all over, the locals shake hands, slap each other on the back, and drink some homemade booze. Now that's a purge I could get behind.
Your home tells me you're good folk, just like us. One of the haves.
And your blue flowers tell me that you support the purge.
Kicking off at number 5, Skeletor. No, not the fantastically camp villain of He-Man, Masters of the Universe, but the psychopathic killer that stalks the screen during the first Purge, which is confusingly the 4th film in the franchise and the grand prequel to how the whole insane death fest came to be. He makes this list over a bunch of others purely for his insatiable urge to participate in the first ever Purge. The film itself begins with Skeletor's voice detailing on camera his dark thoughts and his desire to purge the population of Staten Island and the rest of the world, unleashing his unbridled hatred on other people. Throughout the film, he stalks his victims with a twisted arsenal of makeshift weaponry, a handful of needles, and a myriad of blades. He commits the first ever murder during the Purge, and the NFFA, we'll get to them later, records it as viral propaganda. No thanks. Next up at number 4, The Polite Leader. The first film, this time titled just The Purge, features the Sandins, an upper middle class family who live in an affluent Los Angeles gated community. Although they support the Purge and the political line laid out by the new founding fathers of America, they decide not to participate and instead wait the whole thing out behind their state-of-the-art home security system. This is horror 101 though, and it doesn't take long before that whole facade quickly comes crashing down. Introduce the Polite Leader, a psychopathic pearly white practitioner of the Purge, presumably an Ivy League protege and possibly a potential politician. Well, if he didn't die, that is. This guy haunts the Sandins for the most part of the film, all while keeping a level head as murder reigns around him. He's devoid of empathy and emotion, and even kills his own friend without skipping a beat. He's what my nightmares are made of. Again, no thank you. Coming in at number 3, Big Daddy. This guy is not a nice man. During the actions of the second film, The Purge Anarchy, Big Daddy is a new founding father loyalist hell-bent on coordinating SWAT team targeted attacks on low-income neighborhoods on Purge night, believing it as his patriotic duty to cleanse citizens of the country based on how much they earn for a living. Ironic, right? Throughout the film, he wears a perverse, bloodied apron and a stars and stripes ball cap, making him resemble more of a big game hunter than someone demonstrating their 28th Amendment right. He rides around Los Angeles with a minigun mounted on a truck and a team of armoured mercenaries, and generally is a vile representation as to where political zealotry can get you. Fittingly, his head gets blown off with a shotgun. Go figure. Swinging in at number 2, The Auctioneers. Yeah, admittedly, there's not a lot of screen time for these guys, only making an incredibly brief appearance in The Purge Anarchy, but it was enough to give me the creeps and stick them at second place for this list. I don't know whether it's just the general disregard for the value of human life, or the fact that there's a bunch of people willing to pay for what is essentially murder, but I don't know, this one just freaks me out. Toward the final act of The Purge Anarchy, our group of protagonists are captured by a group of masked purgers and taken to a theatre filled with upper class purgers, who then bid on them to be hunted for their twisted pleasure. I don't know if it's the fact that they wear pearls and bow ties to a mass murder event, or their dead, cold, twisted smiles, but these wealthy weirdos are a bunch that I would never, ever like to meet. And finally, at our number 1 spot, the new founding fathers. Talking of wealthy weirdos, this bunch of dystopian despots pretty much take the cake. Throughout the film's dystopian alternate reality, the new founding fathers of America, or NFFA for short, are a political party controlled by Caleb Warrens, who took control of the US government and established a perverse new regime after a complete economic collapse and rising social conflict. They used the Purge as a political ploy to effectively cull the majority of the population in a violent attempt to improve the economic standards of the already wealthy. They established the Purge as an attempted means of catharsis for the American people, whatever that means, but ultimately was their own undoing, perpetuated by a bunch of psychopathic killers. There's nothing scarier than a suited up politician behind a totalitarian organisation that promises liberation at the expense of its citizens. For me, this is the biggest one. No thanks.